The rain began its descent just past 7 in the evening, a slow, deliberate cascade typical of Oklahoma's brooding thunderstorms. It wasn't the kind of storm that roared in with fury. It crept, a soft menace that whispered of darker things to come. James Carver, a high school history teacher in his late 30s, sat alone in his modest home on the outskirts of Tulsa. His wife, Ellen, and their 2 children, Mia and Ethan, were away for the weekend, visiting Ellen's sister in Little Rock. The solitude was a rare gift for James, whose days were filled with the clamor of teenage voices and the endless grind of lesson plans. Tonight he craved the quiet, the chance to sink into the stillness and let the world fade away. He brewed a pot of chamomile tea, its floral warmth curling through the air, and settled onto the worn leather couch with a stack of ungraded essays. The papers were a mix of earnest attempts and teenage apathy, each one a small battle in his ongoing war to make history matter. Outside, the storm provided a natural soundtrack, a low rumble of thunder rolling across the plains like a distant drumbeat. The house, a sturdy 2-story built in the 1970s, stood firm against the elements. It had weathered worse: tornado warnings, ice storms, power outages that lasted days. James trusted its walls, its creaking floors, its familiar quirks. The backyard stretched 50 feet to a dense line of oaks and pines, a wooded barrier that usually felt like a protective embrace. Tonight, though, it seemed to loom, the trees swaying like silent sentinels under the weight of the rain. The power flickered once, a brief stutter that barely registered. James adjusted his glasses and scribbled a comment on an essay about the Civil War. Lightning cracked outside, a jagged bolt that illuminated the backyard in a stark, white flash. It was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Light, then dark, then the thunder's growl chasing behind. He glanced up from his work, eyes drifting, to the sliding glass doors that led to the patio. Another flash, and there, at the edge of the tree line, stood a man. He was motionless, a silhouette carved against the storm's chaos. Tall, unnaturally still, his outline blurred by the rain but unmistakable. James blinked, heart stuttering. He waited for the next flash, expecting, hoping it was a trick of the light. The lightning came again and the figure was gone. Just trees, their branches thrashing in the wind. He laughed, a nervous chuckle that didn't quite convince him. Too many horror movies, he muttered, rubbing his eyes. He'd watched The Strangers with Ellen last month, and the memory of masked figures lurking in the dark lingered longer than he cared to admit. He shook it off and returned to his grading, but the tension stayed, a faint prickle at the base of his neck. Another flash. The man was back, closer now, maybe 40 feet from the house. James stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood. He crossed to the glass doors, peering into the dark. The floodlight switch was by the kitchen. He flicked it on, bathing the backyard in harsh yellow light. Nothing. Just wet grass and swaying branches. No footprints, no figure. He laughed again, louder this time, trying to drown out the unease. "Get a grip, James," he told himself. He drew the curtains, the heavy fabric muffling the storm's visual assault. But the feeling didn't leave. It clung to him, heavy and cold like the air before a tornado. He made a circuit of the house, checking locks, windows, the garage door. Everything was secure. The alarm system blinked green, its sensors undisturbed. He texted Ellen. "Storm's loud, but all good here. Just being paranoid. Love you." Her reply came quickly. "Stay safe, babe. Call if you need me." He smiled, comforted by her words, but the unease lingered. Another flash of lightning, and the man was closer still, halfway across the yard. James froze, his breath catching. The figure was tall, his shoulders narrow, his arms dangling at his sides like they were too heavy for his frame. His head was tilted slightly as if listening. James turned off the living room light, then the kitchen, plunging the house into darkness. If he couldn't see the man, maybe the man couldn't see him. He retreated to the laundry room, the smallest space in the house, clutching a flashlight and the old wooden baseball bat he kept in the garage. The power went out completely then, the hum of appliances replaced by an oppressive silence. The storm's roar filled the void, rain hammering the roof, wind rattling the windows. Every sound felt amplified, every creak a threat. He sat on the cold tile floor, the bat across his lap, the flashlight's beam slicing through the dark. It was useless, illuminating only fragments of the room, a stack of towels, the corner of the dryer, a cobweb in the ceiling, sexy ceiling. He waited, ears straining for any sound beyond the storm. A creak from the back gate, faint but unmistakable. Wet footsteps on the deck, barely audible over the rain. His heart pounded, his grip tightening on the bat. Lightning flashed again and the man was closer, standing just beyond the patio. In one flash, he was crouched by the trash bins, his silhouette sharp and unnatural. In another, he was pressed against the house, head tilted, listening. James considered calling the police, but what could he say? That he saw a man in fleeting glimpses of lightning, a figure that moved only in the dark. It sounded absurd even to him. He stayed in the laundry room, sweat soaking his shirt despite the cool air. His phone battery dwindled to 10%, the flashlight dimming. Hours dragged on, each minute heavy with dread. Then a knock, soft, deliberate, on the sliding glass door. He froze, breath held, the bat raised. Silence followed, broken only by the thunderstorm's relentless assault. His phone buzzed, a weather alert, nothing more. He didn't move, didn't dare approach the door. Not yet. At 2:30 a.m., the power flickered back on, the house humming back to life. James stood, muscles aching from tension, and crept to the kitchen. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The back door was ajar, just an inch, enough to let in a sliver of cold air. He'd locked it, he was sure of it. The click of the deadbolt was a memory he could still hear. Muddy smudges marred the kitchen floor, wet footprints that stopped abruptly, as if their owner had vanished. He searched the house room by room, closet by closet, even the attic and crawl space. Nothing. The alarm hadn't triggered. No windows were broken. He called the police. They arrived within the hour, their flashlights sweeping the yard. The rain had washed away any tracks outside, they said. No signs of forced entry. Probably a neighbor, one officer suggested. Or someone caught in the storm. James nodded, unconvinced. He spent the rest of the night awake, the bat never far from reach. By morning, he was at the hardware store, buying new locks, motion sensor lights, and a security camera system. He installed a steel bar for the sliding door, a final barrier against the unknown. The cameras recorded nothing unusual in the days that followed, but James never shook the certainty of what he'd seen. The man had been there, moving closer with every flash, invisible in the light. And James knew, deep in his bones, that the only reason he was still here was because he'd stayed awake, watching the dark. In Springfield, Missouri, Sarah Whitaker lived with her 8-year-old daughter, Mallory, in a cozy house that felt like a fresh start after a messy divorce. The place wasn't perfect, crooked window frames, squeaky hinges, but it was theirs, a sanctuary for just the two of them. One summer evening, a storm rolled in, heavy and unyielding, the kind that seemed to shake the earth with its thunder. They'd just finished a dinner of spaghetti, Mallory's favorite, the sauce still staining her lips as they played Uno in the living room. The power cut out mid-game, plunging the room into darkness. Mallory let out a dramatic gasp, then giggled, crawling to Sarah's side. "Extreme mode," Sarah teased, pulling flashlights from a drawer and lighting candles that cast flickering shadows across the walls. They turned the blackout into an adventure, dragging sleeping bags to the living room and building a pillow fort with a kit Mallory had gotten for her birthday. They roasted marshmallows over a tea light, the tiny flame barely strong enough to brown them, and invented a card game with rules that shifted every few minutes. The storm raged outside, wind howling, rain pelting the windows, but inside, it was a bubble of warmth and laughter, until Mallory froze, her laugh dying mid-breath. She turned toward the hallway leading to the kitchen and basement, her eyes narrowing. "There's someone in the basement," she said, her voice flat, certain. Sarah raised an eyebrow, forcing a smile. In your imagination? Mallory shook her head, her braids swinging. No, I saw him. When I got my water bottle from the kitchen, he was walking down the stairs, his back was to me. Sarah's heart skipped. What did he look like? She asked, keeping her tone light. No shoes, Mallory said softly. Head down, like he didn't see me. Sarah's mind raced. A reflection? A shadow? Lightning playing tricks? She grabbed the metal bat from under the couch, told Mallory to stay in the fort, and crept to the basement stairs. The air was thick, humid, the storm's weight pressing in. The basement smelled of old paint and damp earth. But there was something else tonight, a sour, acrid note that made her nose wrinkle. Her flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing the usual clutter: workbench, water heater, laundry pile. Then she saw them, bare footprints, muddy and stark, leading from the basement door to beneath the stairs. No tracks leading out, just one set, stopping cold. She searched every corner, her beam shaking in her hand. Behind the furnace, inside, the crawl space behind the plastic bins. Nothing. Back upstairs, Mallory sat in her sleeping bag, flashlight aimed down the hall like a sentinel. Sarah forced a smile, said it was probably a trick of the light. Mallory didn't argue, just zipped her sleeping bag to her nose and lay down. Sarah didn't sleep. The next morning, the storm had passed. In the yard, she found disturbed patches of grass near the basement window well. No clear footprints, but enough to unsettle her. She bought motion lights and a security camera system. That day, installing them without telling Mallory. One camera faced the back door, another the basement steps, a third the porch. For a few nights, all was quiet. Mallory didn't mention the man again. Normalcy crept back. Then another storm hit, fiercer than the last. The wind, a living force that shook the house. The power died at 10 p.m. Sarah tucked Mallory in on the couch and went to check the fuse box, more out of habit than hope. On the top basement step, fresh mud gleamed in her flashlight's beam. Bare footprints again, uneven and wet, leading to the stairs. Beside them, a towel, neatly folded, with a line of snacks, crackers, a juice box, Mallory's favorite fruit, chews, arranged like an offering. Sarah's stomach churned. She searched the basement again, moving bins, checking panels, crawling halfway into the tight, musty crawl space. Nothing. She called the police, her voice sharp with panic. They swept the house, found no one, suggested a squatter or a prank. Upgrade your locks, they said. Sarah sat up all night watching the camera feeds. At 2:11 a.m., the backyard camera caught him, thin, pale, drenched, his hair plastered to his face. He emerged from the woods, opened the basement storm doors, and slipped inside. No footage showed him leaving. Mallory began waking at night, screaming about a man in the hallway, silent and still, watching her. Sarah added more locks, another camera. One night, the feed caught a tall shadow outside Mallory's door, motionless for 9 minutes before vanishing. No doors opened, no sounds echoed. Sarah packed their things the next day, called a friend with a truck, and moved them to a third-floor apartment with a doorman and hallway cameras. Mallory slept better, but when storms came, she'd ask Sarah to check the hall. And Sarah always did, because they never learned who he was, or if he'd ever left. In Syracuse, New York, January brought a nor'easter that turned drizzle into icy sheets by nightfall. Dr. Emily Hart, a dentist in her early 40s, was alone in her century-old home, her husband, Mark, away at a conference in Boston. There, Golden Retriever Scout curled beside her on the couch, the fireplace casting a warm glow. Emily, in flannel pajamas, sipped wine and half-watched Rear Window, the storm's howl a fitting backdrop. The lights flickered but held, the house creaking under the wind's assault. At 10:30 p.m., a thud broke the rhythm of the storm. Emily paused, assuming it was a branch or ice shifting on the roof. Scout's ears perked, but he didn't bark. Then another thud, heavier, deliberate, like footsteps pacing above. Scout growled, low and steady, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Emily muted the TV, her pulse quickening. The thuds continued, slow and measured, tracking the length of the house. She told herself it was the wind, maybe a raccoon, but the weight of the sound felt wrong, too heavy, too human. She called the non-emergency police line, describing the noises. The dispatcher promised a drive-by. 15 minutes later, an officer arrived, his flashlight sweeping the roof and yard. "No tracks," he said. "Just the storm." Emily thanked him, locked the door, and left the porch light on. The noises stopped, and Scout eventually relaxed. She slept with the lights on, Scout at her side. The next morning, brushing her teeth, Emily noticed the attic hatch above the hallway closet was ajar. Just an inch, but enough to stop her cold. They rarely used the attic, only for holiday decorations. She grabbed a step stool and a flashlight, pushing the hatch open. A musty draft spilled out, carrying a damp, sour smell. The flashlight revealed dust, insulation, and footprints, muddy smudges across the plywood floor leading to the attic window. The latch was broken, the window cracked open, letting in icy air. Emily called a contractor, keeping her story vague. He confirmed the window had been forced open, likely from the roof. No other entry points showed damage. She installed motion lights and cameras, moved to the guest bedroom, and avoided sleeping under the hatch. When Mark returned, she told him enough to worry him, but not enough to scare him. The cameras caught nothing unusual, but Scout still growled at the hatch some nights. Emily checked it every evening, the motion lights burning bright. The footsteps had stopped, but the knowledge that someone had paced above her, silent and unseen, never left. Claire Nguyen, a landscape photographer in her late 20s, loved the solitude of the wilderness. Mount Rainier National Park was her latest escape, a primitive campsite a mile and a half from the road, surrounded by towering pines and the promise of late summer storms. She'd camped there before, drawn to its isolation. No electricity, no rangers, just the raw pulse of nature. Her gear was weatherproof, her tent secure, and she was ready for the rain. The sky darkened by mid-afternoon, and Claire worked fast, pitching her tarp and staking her tent as the wind rose. The rain came in sheets, a relentless drumbeat against the forest. She zipped herself inside, her Kindle glowing, a protein bar, her dinner. The storm's roar drowned out all else, the tent shaking but holding firm. By nightfall, the wind howled, thunder rattling the ground. At 8:45 p.m., a voice cut through the noise. "Hello?" It was close, just outside the tent. Claire froze. "Hello? You in the tent?" A man stood beyond her lantern's glow, wearing a tan rain jacket with a badge and holding a flashlight. "I'm with the Park Service," he said, smiling. "Checking on campers before the storm worsens." His badge looked wrong, printed, not embroidered. His boots were clean, his flashlight a cheap model, not the heavy-duty LEDs rangers carried. "I'm fine," Claire said, keeping her voice steady. "Got here before the rain, hiking out tomorrow." He squinted, trying to see inside. "You alone?" "No," she lied. "My boyfriend's in the other tent, checking the trailhead." His eyes flicked behind her. "No second tent." He nodded slowly. "Good. Storms bring down branches, flash floods. Stay safe." He turned and vanished into the trees. Claire didn't sleep, her bear spray and knife close. The storm raged, and at 3 a.m., she heard her tent's zipper move, a slow, deliberate parting. She gripped her knife, peering through a gap in the tent wall. The man was back, kneeling by the flap, his hand on the zipper, watching. She shifted, the sleeping bag crinkling. He stood and backed away, but she heard him circling, twigs snapping, fabric brushing the tent. When she called out, "I called the rangers," he didn't answer, but the rustling stopped. At dawn, Claire packed and hiked out, not stopping until she reached the ranger station. She reported the man, describing his badge, his clean boots. The rangers exchanged glances. "No one was out there last night," they said. No rangers in that area all week. A week later, they called. A woman had reported a similar man, posing as a ranger, trying to enter her camper. Claire still camps, but never alone. The badge was fake, but the way he watched her, silent and unyielding, was all too real.